The security guards reached for the single father's arm just as the billionaire CEO pointed toward the boardroom door. Around the polished conference table, executives exchanged amused smiles, convinced the quiet man in worn work boots had accidentally entered a meeting meant for powerful corporate leaders. Without asking his name or listening to why he had come, the CEO ordered him removed immediately. He walked out without raising his voice, carrying only a simple leather folder. Exactly 58 minutes later, her company's most important $500 million contract was cancelled with a single phone call, and only then did she discover that the man she had humiliated was the one person whose signature the deal absolutely required. Before this unforgettable story begins, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes people should never be judged by appearances, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise. Your support helps us continue creating emotional stories that inspire hope and remind the world that true influence is often hidden behind ordinary lives. Adrian Cole had spent the past 6 years raising his 9-year-old son, Mason, after losing his wife to a sudden illness. Every morning before sunrise, he prepared breakfast, helped Mason finish his homework, and drove him to school in an aging family sedan before heading to work. His simple clothes and quiet manner rarely attracted attention, but beneath that modest appearance was one of the most respected infrastructure investment specialists in the world. Years earlier, Adrian had founded Horizon Strategic Capital, a private investment partnership managing billions of dollars through carefully selected infrastructure projects. After selling most of his ownership, he stepped away from public life to devote more time to raising Mason, keeping only one responsibility that few people knew about. Every investment exceeding $200 million still required his personal approval before funds could legally be released. That bright spring morning, Adrian arrived at Sterling Infrastructure Group carrying confidential documents for what was expected to become one of the largest construction partnerships of the decade. The proposed agreement would finance a $500 million clean energy transportation project, creating thousands of jobs and transforming regional infrastructure. Although Adrian preferred arriving quietly without assistance or luxury vehicles, the legal documents inside his worn leather folder carried the final authorization required before Horizon Strategic Capital could transfer the investment funds. Inside Sterling's headquarters, preparations for the historic signing ceremony filled the executive floor with excitement. Television crews waited outside while lawyers completed final paperwork. At the center of the celebration stood Victoria Langford, Sterling's ambitious CEO. Brilliant and determined, she had built the company into an international success through years of relentless effort. Yet that same success had slowly convinced her that important people always arrived with entourages, tailored suits, and expensive cars. When Adrian entered the executive reception area, several employees assumed he had come to repair office equipment or deliver maintenance supplies. After politely introducing himself to the receptionist, he explained that he had an appointment regarding the Horizon investment agreement. A misunderstanding quickly followed when his name failed to appear on the visitor schedule because his arrival had been intentionally kept confidential by Horizon's legal department until the final authorization meeting. Moments later, Victoria herself stepped into the reception area after hearing the commotion. Without asking Adrian for identification or reviewing his documents, Victoria glanced briefly at his worn shoes, inexpensive watch, and weathered leather folder before concluding he had entered the executive floor by mistake. Believing the board meeting could not be interrupted, she firmly instructed security to escort him from the building. Adrian calmly attempted to explain that the Horizon agreement required one final signature before funding could proceed, but his words disappeared beneath impatient instructions to remove him immediately. Looking around the room, he noticed dozens of executives silently watching the uncomfortable scene. Rather than arguing, he simply thanked the receptionist for her courtesy, wished everyone a pleasant afternoon, and quietly walked toward the elevators. Exactly 30 minutes later, Horizon Strategic Capital's legal department received Adrian's written recommendation to suspend approval pending a complete review of Sterling Infrastructure's executive decision-making procedures. Since company policy required unanimous approval from all remaining investment partners, the transfer of $500 million stopped immediately. Lawyers preparing the signing ceremony suddenly received official notification that Horizon had frozen the transaction until further notice. Confusion spread rapidly through Sterling's headquarters as executives searched desperately for answers, unaware that the quiet father they had dismissed less than an hour earlier held the authority to determine the future of the company's largest contract. The celebration inside Sterling Infrastructure's headquarters came to a sudden halt. Moments after the legal notice arrived, the excitement that had filled the executive floor was replaced by stunned silence. Attorneys reread the email several times, hoping they had misunderstood. The $500 million investment had not been delayed because of financial concerns or market conditions. It had been suspended because the final approving partner had formally withdrawn his authorization. Every executive looked at one another in confusion until Horizon Strategic Capital's legal counsel revealed the identity of the missing decision-maker. The quiet single father escorted out of the boardroom less than an hour earlier was Adrian Cole, the founding partner whose signature carried the final legal authority over the entire transaction. Victoria Langford felt her confidence disappear instantly. She replayed every moment in her mind, realizing she had never once asked Adrian to identify himself or explain why he had come. She had judged him entirely by his appearance, believing expensive suits and luxury cars were signs of importance. Now hundreds of employees, investors, and journalists waited outside expecting a historic contract signing that could no longer happen. The embarrassment reached every corner of the company as news spread that Sterling's own CEO had unknowingly removed the person responsible for approving the investment. Determined to make things right, Victoria personally traveled to Horizon Strategic Capital's quiet headquarters later that afternoon. Instead of finding an extravagant corporate office, she discovered a modest building where employees greeted each other by name and treated every visitor with equal respect. Adrian welcomed her politely into a simple meeting room decorated with photographs of bridges, schools, hospitals, and clean energy projects funded through Horizon's investments. The walls reminded visitors that every financial decision ultimately affected ordinary families rather than balance sheets alone. Victoria sincerely apologized for the humiliation Adrian had experienced. She admitted that years of success had slowly convinced her that appearance reflected ability and authority. Adrian listened patiently before explaining why he had suspended the investment. The problem was never personal pride. If the leadership of a company could dismiss an unknown visitor without respect or curiosity, it raised serious concerns about how they might treat employees, contractors, suppliers, and local communities once hundreds of millions of dollars were entrusted to their care. For Adrian, character always mattered more than financial projections. Deeply affected by those words, Victoria immediately began changing the culture inside Sterling Infrastructure. Mandatory leadership training emphasized humility, respect, and careful listening. New policies ensured every visitor, employee, and contractor would be welcomed professionally regardless of clothing, job title, or background. Managers were encouraged to evaluate ideas based on merit rather than appearance. Over the following weeks, Adrian quietly observed those changes, speaking with employees throughout the company instead of relying solely on executive reports. Satisfied that Sterling had genuinely transformed rather than simply protecting its public image, Adrian recommended reinstating the investment. Horizon's partners unanimously approved the decision, and the historic $500 million clean energy project officially moved forward. Thousands of construction jobs were created, regional transportation improved dramatically, and communities benefited from one of the largest sustainable infrastructure developments in the country's history. Yet the greatest success was not measured in dollars. It was measured in the respect that now defined every level of the organization. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes true leadership begins with humility, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories that inspire hope, compassion, and second chances. Special request. Please comment, respect everyone before you know their story. As the golden afternoon sunlight reflected across the newly completed transportation project months later, Adrian picked up Mason from school in the same ordinary family sedan. Looking at his smiling son, he quietly remembered that the greatest contracts in life are never signed on paper. They are written every day through the kindness, fairness, and respect we choose to show other people. 1 year after the $500 million agreement was finally signed, the clean energy transportation project had become one of the country's greatest success stories. New rail lines connected struggling communities, thousands of families found stable employment, and businesses flourished along the newly developed routes. Newspapers praised the engineering achievement, but those who knew the full story understood that the project's greatest foundation had not been concrete or steel. It had been a lesson in humility that transformed an entire company. Sterling Infrastructure became known for something far more valuable than impressive profits. Every employee, from receptionists and maintenance workers to senior executives, was treated with the same respect. The company's visitor policy was rewritten, ensuring that every person entering the building would be welcomed with courtesy before assumptions were ever made. New employees learned the story during orientation, not to embarrass anyone, but to remind them that one careless judgment can cost far more than money. Victoria Langford changed more than her leadership style. She began visiting construction sites, speaking directly with engineers, welders, truck drivers, security guards, and office assistants. She listened to their ideas, thanked them personally, and encouraged managers to recognize talent wherever it appeared. During business conferences around the world, she openly admitted that the most important lesson of her career had come from a quiet single father carrying a worn leather folder. Her honesty inspired many other executives to examine their own assumptions about leadership and success. Adrian Cole continued living the simple life he had chosen years before. He still woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast for Mason, drove the same family sedan, and quietly reviewed investment proposals from his modest office. Although he managed projects worth billions of dollars, very little about his lifestyle changed. He believed wealth should create opportunities for others, not distance a person from ordinary life. Whenever journalists asked why he never displayed his success, Adrian smiled and replied that the greatest investment he would ever make was raising a son with kindness, integrity, and compassion. Inspired by Adrian's example, Horizon Strategic Capital and Sterling Infrastructure together created the Cole Future Builders Foundation, providing scholarships for students from single-parent families pursuing careers in engineering, construction, environmental science, and business leadership. Mason attended the foundation's first scholarship ceremony and watched dozens of young people receive opportunities that might otherwise have remained impossible. Seeing those hopeful faces reminded Adrian that real success is measured not by what we accumulate but by the doors we open for others. On the anniversary of the contract signing, a simple bronze plaque was placed in Sterling's headquarters lobby. Instead of celebrating financial achievements, it carried a message every employee and visitor would read. Every great opportunity begins with respect. Never judge a person before learning their story. Employees often paused before the plaque, remembering how one mistaken assumption had nearly cost the company its future, and how one act of humility had ultimately changed its culture forever. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness belongs in every workplace, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories about courage, family, and second chances. Special request. Please comment. Respect opens doors that pride can never unlock. As the warm evening sun settled over the completed transportation network, Adrian picked up Mason from school and drove home in the same old sedan. Thousands of people now traveled safely each day because of a project that almost never happened. Looking at his son smiling in the passenger seat, Adrian realized that the greatest legacy anyone can leave is not a fortune or a famous name. It is a life that teaches others to treat every person with dignity, because the next stranger you meet may be the one who changes your future forever.